Tarot is a powerful tool with the ability to transform yourself through self-discovery, facilitate mindfulness, connect with the divine, develop your intuition, and provide guidance. It can not only be a good tool, but also an essential one for magical practitioners along their path. But why not expand that tool to include one of the most unique and rewarding decks out there, the Thoth deck? Its rich symbolism, profound depth, and history make it stand apart from other decks. Even practitioners who don't understand what this deck is or where it comes from will swear by it. It's notorious for being difficult to understand and even more difficult to use. Some even claim the energy of this deck is too much, often overwhelming. But after this presentation, it won't be for you. You will leave understanding what this deck is, where it comes from, and how to use it. As a side note, this presentation is actually an adaptation of the talk I gave at Mystic South this year of 2024. Obviously, it is not exactly the same, but if you missed my talk at Mystic South and wanted to come, then you will be getting similar information in this presentation. This is going to be the flow of this presentation. I'm going to explore the history and context of this deck. One of the important parts of the history is the woman who realized this deck under the instruction of Aleister Crowley. Her name was Frieda Lady Harris. I assume everyone knows who Crowley is, so I will be spending more time on her. Then I move into the more practical stuff and how to interpret the cards. This includes key differences between the Thoth deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. The zodiac in the Thoth deck may be different from what you're used to, so we talk about that as well as the significance of the Hebrew alphabet. To cater to a diverse audience, I go from basic to advanced concepts. I am hoping by the end of this presentation, everyone will feel empowered to go out there and start using the Thoth deck in a meaningful and powerful way. There are many different types of tarot decks out there. The most common one you're likely familiar with is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. The second most popular deck is the Thoth deck. The decks really aren't that different. You read them the same way. Both can be used a variety of different ways and for different purposes, such as divination, meditation, guidance, and so on. There are, however, some key differences in the art, meaning, and their correspondences, which we'll go into much more detail later. The Thoth deck was created by Frieda Lady Harris under the instruction of Aleister Crowley. She was a student in Aleister Crowley's teaching order, the AA. Her vision was to create a forward-looking deck in line with the Thelemic idea of the Aeon of Horus. The Rider-Waite-Smith deck has more traditional imagery. It draws on popular culture like Shakespeare. It looks nostalgic and sort of like a Ren fair. The Thoth, in contrast, looks more modern and futuristic, which was the intentional choice by Frieda Lady Harris. Frieda Lady Harris is too often left out of the conversation around the tarot deck that she was instrumental in realizing. She was a visionary artist who brought to life this amazing deck. This deck is her art. There is no Thoth deck without her. However, she felt the need that she needed extra help with the magic part of the deck, so she enlisted the help of Aleister Crowley. She paid him a stipend for his advice and help understanding the magic. In an article, Deja Whitehouse notes that Crowley and Harris were more than just pupil and student. They formed a strong and enduring friendship that lasted to the end of Crowley's life. Sadly, neither of them lived to see the printing of this deck. Let's spend a little bit more time on Frieda Lady Harris and look at some of the amazing art she did outside of the deck she made. I think it gives interesting context. Frieda Lady Harris was a very skilled and competent artist. She was inspired by surrealism and attracted to mysticism, magic, and the occult. She was also interested in Greek and Celtic mythology, Christian mysticism, and theosophy. I mourn the fact that she is too often left out of the conversation on this deck. Erasure of her work and contributions in favor of just referring to this deck as Aleister Crowley's deck is another example of devaluing the work of women in the occult throughout history. Fortunately, there has been some more recent academic interest in the women of the occult, and I would like to see some of that same energy bleed over to practitioners as well. I find the intentional obfuscation and devaluing of the work of women in the occult, and in particular Thelema, particularly strange and missing the point. It's downright weird. Aleister Crowley himself, as noted by Hymenaeus Beta, who is the current OHO of the OTO, says Crowley enjoyed collaborating with gifted women and described Crowley as an early feminist who, quote, produced some of his best work through such liaisons, end quote. Additionally, Crowley himself referred to Harris as a genius with regards to reworking the Thoth deck as something completely new, where each card was its own masterpiece. So, what about that Crowley guy? Let's talk about him. If you are on this channel, then I'm going to assume you know who Crowley is. However, I feel that it would be a disservice to not have a brief chat about him. His magic was critical to this deck. Crowley was, in some sense, in the words of Rodney Orpheus, an Einstein of magic. His work continues to inspire and help people today. Crowley was an openly queer man during a time you just weren't. He was a rock climber, a world traveler fascinated by other people and cultures who found truth and meaning in mysticism and magic. There is profound, and I do mean profound, amounts of misinformation about Crowley out there. He was relentlessly attacked by tabloids during his life and after. And then, of course, fast forward to the present day, a lot of this complete fabrication and falsehoods were drummed up for the satanic panic to scare people again. So much of what you have probably heard about him is completely false. However, regardless of however you feel about Crowley, I think it would be such a shame to pass up on a powerful, effective magical technology such as this beautiful deck because of its association with Crowley and these false perceptions around him being evil. One of the reasons this deck is so special and stands apart from the rest of the tarot decks out there is that it is in line with the current Aeon, the Aeon of Horus. The Aeon of Horus comes from this idea in Thelema that mankind goes through different aeons. Crowley saw human history as divided into 3 ages or aeons, each of which lasts approximately 2,000 years. According to this view, the dominant religious paradigms throughout the progression of human civilization follow regular patterns. The first and oldest religious paradigm is thought to be the matriarchal age attributed to Isis. A patriarchal paradigm attributed to Osiris came next. Then came the Aeon of the Child. The son of Osiris and Isis was Horus, thus making this the Aeon of Horus, following the classic Yod-He-Vav-He formula. This Aeon of Horus represents liberation, self-determination, freedom, and a movement away from the shame and guilt of the previous Aeon. Frieda Lady Harris was aware of this and makes intentional use of art to convey deep meaning, not only esoteric, but also scientific. This is a forward-thinking deck that openly embraces science. This reflects the definition of magic Crowley laid out, which was, magic is the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with will. The art of the Thoth deck also makes use of lines to convey movement. The shapes in art are almost futuristic and bursting with life, ready to embrace the new Aeon. So, let's get into those cards. Following the tradition of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Crowley attributes the 22 cards of the major arcana to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. As you can see, the influence of the Golden Dawn extends to the back of the card, which features a Golden Dawn rosy cross. Let's talk about the Hebrew alphabet in traditional Kabbalah now, as it relates to this tarot deck. So, this is the Hebrew alphabet going from left to right. It is normally read right to left. In traditional Kabbalah, each of the letters has an attribution. Some of the letters are elemental, while others are planetary or zodiacal. In the alphabet, there are 3 mother letters which are elemental. They are attributed to air, water, and fire. In the Golden Dawn, air is yellow, water is blue, and fire is red. I added the colors for extra visualization for you. There are remaining 19 letters, and in that we have 7 double letters that I get attributed to the 7 planets. These 7 planets are the traditional planets in astrology, including the sun and the moon. I have colored the 7 letters for visual reference. Then, after this, that leaves 12 single letters. So now we have the 12 single letters that are attributed to the 12 zodiac. Once you map the 22 majors to the 22 letters of the alphabet, then you get a whole bunch of series of correspondences that unfold from this. As you can see, there is a Hebrew letter on the bottom left side of the card and a planet on the right. These correspondences inform what is on the card. Practically speaking, you don't have to memorize all of these correspondences. You can just go off of what is on the image. However, to go deeper, the correspondences could be really helpful. I would also like to note, if this seems terrifying, that you are in fact okay. A.E. Waite of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck was also a Golden Dawn member. Correspondences are rolled up into that deck as well, but are perhaps less obvious than those in the Thoth deck. I think if you can handle the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, then you can handle this. Here is another way of visualizing correspondences that are reflected in each card. The question is really, what is the easiest way for you to learn and retain this information? Some people find charts like this very helpful. But what is more helpful for you could look like flashcards or something more organic, like laying the cards out on the ground in order. There really is no wrong way to learn. Another note on the Hebrew letters is that they can be mapped onto the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life in Kabbalah is the map of the mind of God, the path of return, or the path of creation. As you can see, the cards can be mapped onto it. Note that 2 of the paths at Hay and Zadi have 2 cards, because the Thoth deck is doing something different with the zodiac according to the Book of the Law, which we will get into later. This is just your little preview. To help you understand this Tree of Life and the Tarot, I want to read to you directly from Lon's book, Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. Lon has such an amazing way of explaining things that I think this is worth your while. So, quote, "The Golden Dawn degree system is based upon the Kabbalistic schema called the Tree of Life. This diagram will become very important to us in our study of the Thoth Tarot and the initiatory career of its creator. The Tree of Life consists of 10 Sephiroth, emanations from or aspects of the Supreme Being. These 10 Sephiroth can be considered levels of consciousness, the lowest 10 being that of the material plane, the highest one being the supreme consciousness of deity. In the course of our incarnation adventures, each of us, in one way or another, eventually climbs this tree, gaining ever more subtle levels of consciousness until we finally achieve union with Godhead and the supreme spiritual liberation. The tarot is a perfect representation of the Tree of Life. The ace of each suit represents the top sphera, and the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of each suit represents its respective sphera on the tree. There are also 22 paths that connect the 10 Sephiroth and facilitate the candidate's climb up the tree. These 22 paths are represented in tarot by the 22 trump cards. We will discuss the Tree of Life in more detail in Chapter 9, and he goes on. But yeah, I think this is a fantastic explanation of how the tarot cards interact and can be joined together on the Tree of Life. One of the key differences between the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and the Thoth deck is that they have different names for some of the cards. Let's talk about those changes. With a change of name comes nuanced differences. Starting with the Magician, that becomes the Magus. Magus refers to an advanced grade in Aleister Crowley's teaching system. Justice becomes Adjustment. The idea that justice, or this idea of balance, is a constant process. It's an ever-evolving one requiring adjustment. I think about life, and as we go through it, we are never in a static state. We are constantly adapting and evolving to everything life throws at us. It's sort of like you're balancing on a balance beam. You have to continue to adjust yourself to what comes your way. Strength becomes Lust. The image on the Lust card is of Babylon riding the beast, which is a part of thelemic symbolism. Strength and lust are both also attributed to Leo. You can see the leonine qualities to both cards, just expressed differently. The lust card symbolism reflects Crowley and Harris's attempts to better align the tarot with the new aeon. Temperance becomes art. In the Thoth Tarot, the moralistic meaning of temperance is done away with in favor of a magical and alchemical interpretation. In Crowley's time, there was a temperance movement that was against drinking and smoking. Such restrictions were antithetical to Thelema and the new aeon. So, the temperance card became the art card. Judgment became the aeon. This is another place where Crowley gets away from Christian imagery and replaces it with new Aeonic imagery instead. The image on this card is Frieda Lady Harris's stylized version of the Stele of Revealing. The Stele of Revealing is an important Egyptian artifact in Thelema. The universe becomes the world. The design isn't very different, but the shift represents a more outward and scientific thinking of the universe versus just the Earth. As you can see in the artwork of the card, you have a Mobius strip behind the figure. In mathematics, Mobius strips are 3D objects that only have one side. And if you look at the bottom of the card, there is a house-looking thing, and that thing is a different arrangement of the periodic table of elements by J.W.N. Sullivan. A key difference that is important to understand is that the Zodiac in the Thoth deck is different from that in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Remember how we just talked about how 2 paths on the Tree of Life are shown having 2 cards? That's because the Hey-Zadi switch, or the double loop of the Zodiac. On the right is a visualization of the switch from Aleister Crowley's Book of Thoth. To understand why this loop is happening, let's take a look into the central sacred holy text of Thelema, the Book of the Law. This is a channel text full of philosophy, poetry, and deep esoteric knowledge. As instructed by the comment left on this book by Crowley, also known as the comment or the Tunis comment, it is up to the individual to interpret this book with reference to Crowley's commentary. But I'd like to call your attention to this line, quote, "All these old letters of my book are right, but Zadi is not the star." Crowley interpreted this old letters as the Hebrew alphabet letters, and the book is the tarot. However, with regards to the zodiac in the current aeon as ushered in by the equinox of the gods, there has been a switch in the zodiacal attributions. For each age or aeon, there is an associated zodiacal ruler. Pisces and Virgo is the axis of the old aeon, with Jesus being associated with the fish. Virgo, the Virgin, is the esoteric aspect of the Virgin Mary. In the new aeon, there's a flip along this axis, so you get the star and the emperor trading places. On the other side, you get justice and strength trading places. The result of this is that the zodiac sign for the cards, the star and the emperor stays the same, but the Hebrew letter it is assigned to changes. Meanwhile, justice and strength trade numerical values. As you can see, justice, which was 11, becomes adjustment 8, and strength 8 goes to lust 11. Here are my practical tips for using the deck. First of all, get familiar with the cards. Take time with each card observing the symbolism and intricate details of the art. There was a lot packed in there. Review your correspondences as necessary and be sure to take time to appreciate the symbols, color, motion, and meaning of each card. Because there is so much on the card, it may be useful to order one of the larger decks. Of course, your mileage may vary. Maybe the smaller deck is easier for you to flip through and shuffle, but do consider looking, especially if you're making use of the art, looking and using a bigger card. Something that is important to remember is that when Frieda Lady Harris painted these, they were actually quite large, full-size paintings that were shrunken down to these small cards. So that larger card does have its advantages. My next piece of advice is to make use of those symbols. Don't feel like you have to memorize everything immediately. The cards are chock full of symbols to help you out. You don't have to return back to the book with every card you pull for a reading. It's all on the card to help you. Of course, if you find yourself stuck on something, then it's okay to ask for help. Books are a fantastic resource. I included some book recommendations in the description of the video. That's not all you can look into, but those are some books to get you started. And most importantly, you got this. If there is a will, then there is a way. This deck may seem challenging at first, but now you are more than ready to go out there and start using it. My hope is that you've found this introduction to the Thoth Tarot useful and inspiring. Go out there, use this deck, and get the most out of your magical practice. As always, thank you for watching, and I am the center of expression for the primal will to good, and so are you.